in the Miracle Mile, this is something I think Hollywood has set a good area for us to look at and learn from those experiences. Now, ironically, when I was looking at this and thinking about the Miracle Mile being a transit-oriented development, which is a term that amongst developers and urban developers is often thrown around, and we kind of look at, think of locations and things and how we're going to build ground-up construction and how to transform an area. What we see a lot in Los Angeles, what we've seen in Hollywood and in some of the other developments that we've been involved in different areas in the city, is that it's really it's managing a confluence of factors of what's already existing and then looking at and what we can add to that, but growing off of what has been successful in that area before. Ironically, I think when thinking about this, I decided I thought it'd be interesting. This was from, and a lot of these pictures are from the USC archives, but it's from a recent article on how the Miracle Mile got its name. And as we use that term TOD in transit-oriented development, really, this area in the Miracle Mile was probably the first transit-oriented development area in Los Angeles. It was a different type of transit that we're used to referring to now when thinking about the metro lines. But this area was the first area that was outside of downtown, where as the automobile proliferated throughout the city and throughout the country, it was the first area that was built outside of walking and carriage distance from downtown. So this is actually the intersection of Wilshire and Fairfax right there in the middle. In 1920. And as you can see, 10 years later, this is about 1929, 1930. Immediately, we have the roads out here, and you can see the automobiles all over the place.
Potholes,
The Desmond's building, and of course, at the time, I think this is an important point, that this was really from the private sector and the public sector serving as being there for the people and helping the businesses and the people in the area, being responsive and aiding the private sector in what they needed to build. The reason the area got the name the Miracle Mile is because at the time a lot of people, you can look up the specifics, there's different stories to it, but a lot of people believe that it was simply a miracle that this happened, that this area grew. Now that didn't come from government planning, that came from a developers with visions, retailers with a vision, who were able to move in. And instead of impeding, government acted in a way to aid the private sector in moving forward with these ideas. This is the area, I think this is about 1940, that's Park La Brea, that big open area that hasn't been developed yet on that, what's our right on the picture. Yeah. This is the May Company building under construction, and then the next year, the finished, which is funny, it's literally a year later you see from there, and sometimes in LA it's difficult to go from one year to the next looking at these pictures. You used to think, 3-4 year difference. This is the same year, Coulter's department store. And a postcard of the Miracle Mile at the time, probably about 1940. So, we, as thinking back and looking at what our company's experienced, we've been in existence since the late 70s. So when the initial red line, the first stages of the purple line first went in, we were actually intimately involved. And I know, Tom, you were involved with us at that time.
I was your age.
So I was thinking back upon experiences, because you often can look in books, and ULI, which is an organization John and I are both part of, you can buy books and look at other cities that have done transit-oriented development, but it's really a completely different story in LA. We have, as I mentioned before, and as Hollywood has experienced, we have existing conditions. We have government that's already set in place, so it's how are we going to work with what we have, both strengths and weaknesses, to make this successful going forward. So looking back at some things that we've done and thinking back about the problems we've had and the successes, this is the Fine Arts Building, which is actually on 7th Street. We redeveloped this building. It was originally built in 1925. We redeveloped this building in the 80s. Mayor Reardon was a partner of ours, before he was mayor, obviously, at that time. This is a block south of Wilshire, but right next to this is where the red line, where people can get onto the red line, and there's a portal across the street from there and on the same block in the neighboring building. At this time, luckily, I know that Metro has come a long way in their construction methods and their engineering, because At this time, it was actually quite disruptive at the time. And so that's something, again, I think moving forward, a key to this is being as quick as possible. We need to make sure that there's enough opportunity for the public to voice their concerns. But once construction starts, I mean, without being unsafe, but it's something that certainly we've seen projects go up with the private sector that have been, despite problems sometimes from government intervention, have been able to move forward at a much faster pace than potentially civic projects like the Metro. So I think going forward, this will be a great opportunity to see how far the Metro has come from some of the past histories with problems with digging underneath the streets. That's the inside of the building. Terminal Annex was a project where we acted to do entitlements, to do a master plan for the entire building in the area about 10 years ago, and it was the largest unanimously approved master plan in LA. It still is. And then the Wiltern Theater. We again at this time, I think the Wiltern has benefited greatly. This is on the purple line. That is the same extension that will be coming down here. So we sold this in 1999. But we bought it in the early 80s, so we were there during all of the construction. And I think the building has benefited greatly from the Metro line. Again, it was difficult at that time interacting with Metro. Our building actually sank a little bit in the street, and we had to deal with that. But those are learning experiences, and I think going forward, these are things that I hope our building up the street, I don't plan on it sinking, so hopefully we've all learned from this. That's the inside. And then, of course, this is the building we own right up here, which will be our next redevelopment along the Wilshire Transit line. Looking at some of the past successes that we've had, this is something in Alhambra. We call this development the Alhambra. It's 45 acres. On the bottom left there, we have a Kohl's anchored retail center. And then on the right side, we have almost 1 million square feet of office space. And we have entitlements right now to build about 311 residential units, which we're going to build on the same campus. And although this is off a freeway line, or a freeway, excuse me, the 10 freeway, this is something where those 3 Ds that were mentioned by Neil earlier, this is something where we have a mix of uses. And that's the key here, where whether it's on the Metro line or from driving, this is a location where people can pull up and they can do whatever they need to do through that whole day to reduce vehicle miles traveled, so that it's not something where everywhere somebody goes, somebody has to get into a car and go somewhere else. And I think that's something that the Miracle Mile is as a tremendous strength, where we do have a mix of uses. I don't know if we call it luck or what it is, because it happened through different generations in the history of Los Angeles. But right now, we're a couple hundred feet from residential units. We have office and retail right here, and the richest cultural center in Los Angeles with LACMA, La Brea Tar Pits Page Museum, the A+D Museum, and other folk craft and art museum. So it's a great mix of uses here that'll allow us to leverage these Metro dollars into being able to have people come in the evening and the daytime and on weekends for all different types of reasons. Here are just some pictures of that's the retail center. So, anyway, to further look at this area and what the types of strengths and weaknesses that this area has, again, the cultural uses will be key here, and I think is a tremendous strength. In the same line of thinking that Wilshire was originally the first transit-oriented development really in Los Angeles along the automobile, because of the automobile, this is something that's led to Wilshire Boulevard being a little bit overwhelming for a pedestrian being able to walk across the street. And at the same time, we have to realize that we do have traffic in the city, and it's something where we gradually need to, I guess, take the training wheels off and not worry as much about the flow of traffic and start providing alternatives like bike paths, like the Metro line, where people can get out of their cars and walk around and not have to continually get back into the car. This is going to be something that is going to be a continual challenge, I think, in the Miracle Mile, just because of the size of Wilshire and because of how many cars go up and down Wilshire, which, in addition to that, I think the size of the blocks is something where it makes it more difficult. Wilshire is linear, so it makes a difficult situation. Luckily, it is 1 mile, so that's definitely a walkable distance through a day for different reasons. But that's something where you see other, like in Hollywood, where people can go and walk down different directions from the street and go to different uses. That'll be something that's a challenge here in being able to, how to guide the people where the walking paths will be. Now, given those challenges and given the strengths of the area, I think the most positive thing that we have in this area is the people in the area and the politicians and the way that everyone is able to work together. I know there's been a little bit more controversy lately because of what's going on with the metro, but in terms of the street, for example, Department of Transportation removed crosswalks a few years back, and Tom was actually instrumental in helping us get those crosswalks put back in. Which, it's interesting if you look at it from a government perspective, you know, the DOT was working completely independently from people that were local in the area, and their one goal in mind is to reduce any impediments to traffic. Now that is it's really the wrong way of thinking, in my opinion, because that allows people to, it diverts people away from being able to park and cross the street and go to these different uses and different things. People would have to walk several blocks to be able to go from this side of the street that we're on across from LACMA. Recently, we applied at a building on the street for a conditional use permit for a restaurant, and my friend Ken Hickson, who's here, was at first, we've always remained friends, but we had an adversarial relationship regarding the entitlements, and something that you rarely see in Los Angeles, unfortunately, is something that I think will make this area very successful in being able to look at the pros and cons and look at the benefits and the pitfalls and problems with being under construction and having the metro, which is we were able to work out our differences before going to city hearings and without any attorneys or anything like that, and we came to an agreement ourselves on what's able to happen. That's very rare in Los Angeles. Usually you see much more combative, I think, sides both from the developer side and from the residential association or whatever community group side. So that type of interaction, if we continue with that in this area, and involvement really with all sides. We had the residential association, Tom's office, and the Mid-City West Community Council all involved, is something where if we work out the differences together instead of things being held up by lawsuits or one side winning at the cost of the other side, I think collectively we can leverage the strengths of this area and mitigate some of the weaknesses. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.